is going to be a little bit of a problem because I have some pretty long lines here. So we'll see whether it will be easy to figure out like this. There's nothing to say about the precondition because we don't have any global variables to begin with. The first line to execute is line 27. Line 27 is just invoking main. Main does not return a value, which means return line number is fine. And we're returning to post. That part is easy. And we have something else that we have to set up here, because main, even though it has no parameters, it does have a local variable, doesn't it? In fact, it has a local variable that is an array. So the way we do this is, just like before, we have to allocate 3 columns this time for the array A, because A has 3 elements. Okay? So we have array A, then we have to specify what is A bracket 0, A bracket 1, and A bracket 2. What do you think? What is A again? A is an array of 3 elements, but it is a local. It's a local variable. So what do we know about the initial values of a local variable? Nothing. They're unknown, right? They have some kind of value. I just don't know what it is. So in this case, it applies to every single element in the array. In other words, if I allocate an array as a local variable, then every single element in the array will start with an unknown value. Okay? So this is not something that's entirely new because we know about local variables already. We know about arrays already. This is a combination of those 2 concepts. They do not conflict with each other at all. It is just an extension of what we know about, stuff that we have talked about. Okay? Do we have any questions at this point? Just executing line 27 itself. No questions? Then we move ahead and talk. Yep, go ahead.
Why didn't we already assign 4, 7, and 11 to those variables? Since we're going to assign them now?
Yes, we will execute line 22 right now.
Okay.
Line 22 is the first line that has any action to do. So we'll assign a 4 to column D, which is A bracket 0. Then we have line 23 putting a 7 into column E, and then we have line 24 putting a value of 11 into column F. Are we doing okay so far? This part is pretty much the same stuff that we have talked about before. On line 25, this is the first time we have seen passing an array by reference. So the question is, how do we set up those things? But before we talk about that, let's deal with the return info stuff. I know this has to be a return info instead of a return line number. Why do I do that? Why do I know? It's because bsearch returns values. Okay? If you look at the definition of bsearch, it has a return statement, and as a result, I have to use return info. But the way I set up return info is simply to state the line number, which is line 25, and I will print whatever the invocation returns. And that means the return info cell is actually pretty easy to set up like that. Any questions at this point? No questions? Now how do we set up all the other stuff? Okay? Because when we invoke the subroutine bsearch, there are a few things we have to set up. Okay? We have the parameters A, B, E, K, and then we have the local variable M. The local variable M is the easiest one because it is always unknown as a local variable. K is easy to set up here because if you look at the main subroutine, I just specify 5 to go to K, which is passed by value. Okay, so we just specify a 5 here. E is also easy to figure out because in this case, bar A bar minus 1 goes to E. A has 3 elements. Bar A bar is 3. 3 minus 1 is 2. So parameter E starts with a value of 2. B is just 0. The big question is, what is A? I use A, which is a local variable, to pass to A, which is a parameter that is passed by reference. So in this case, this A is technically an alias of column. Oh, I have to look it up myself too. It is an alias of column D to column F. Okay? It's basically an alias of multiple columns. It is a way to find an array. As a result, it is a way to find multiple columns and not just one. Are we kind of doing okay with this concept? Okay? In other words, we are extending the concept of passing by reference to also handle arrays. Is that okay? Now we can go ahead and make everything else look a little bit better, because this, if we don't do this, we'll be running out of screen space really, really soon. This is the context of one invocation of binary search, the subroutine. Okay, and you can already kind of see that this type of subroutine using recursion to replace a loop can potentially take more resources to run. Because if you remember from the previous example, using a loop to deal with binary search, we only have one B, we only have one E, we only have one K. In this case, we have one set of B states per invocation. So that means it's going to take up more resources. After we set up all this stuff, we can go into the subroutine. The first line that does any action is line 7. Line 7 is only going to say B is greater than E, but this time it is false because B is 0 and E is 2. Because it is false, the condition is false, we go to line 9, but we don't trace line 9, we trace line 10, the first line after the else. We have to compute M. Yep.
I'm sorry, I got a little lost on B, E, and K. How do they get 0, 2, and 5?
It is the invoke statement itself. 0 goes to B, bar A bar minus 1, which is 3 minus 1, which is 2, goes to E,
okay.
and then 5 goes to K, is just a constant. Okay. So you basically have to look at which line causes this to happen. It is on line 25. Okay, so we are back to line 10. Line 10 is going to compute the value of M. In this case, it's really easy because B is 0, E is 2. 0 plus 2 is 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. The floor of 1 is 1. So M gets a value of 1 on line 10. After line 10, we go to line 11. Line 11, now this one is a little bit more interesting because now we have to say what exactly is A bracket M. What is A? A is a parameter passed by reference. It is a reference to column D to column F. Then you have to go back to column D to column F. Oh, it is an array. Which element of the array am I trying to access? I'm trying to access A bracket M. M is 1. So we are accessing column E. Column E has a value of 7 at this point. Are we doing okay while we are accessing column E? So getting back to this context, column E has a value of 7. K has a value of 5. 7 is less than K is false, which means we have to go to line 13. Line 13 is asking the question in the opposite way. K is less than A bracket M, and that one is true because K is 5 and A bracket M is 7. 5 is less than 7 is true. That means we go to line 14. Line 14 is our recursive step, which means we are calling or invoking binary search again, which means we have to set up just about everything that we have seen here. So we might as well just copy the heading of every single column so that we know what columns we have to set up. Let's deal with the easy one first, and then we go back and deal with return line number. We know one thing does not change is K, because the value that we are looking for does not change depending on which iteration or which invocation we are dealing with. So we know we are still looking for 5. M as a local variable always starts with an unknown value. And A is already passed by reference to me. I'm just passing it by reference again to the next person. So it is also known as column D to column F, because we don't pass the reference of a reference. We always just pass along the reference to the original item. Are we doing okay so far with how we passed parameter A, how we set up local variable M, and also parameter K? Because those are the easy cases. The more tricky one is going to be, in this case, B is easy because I'm just passing B along, and in my current context, B has a value of 0, so we're just going to pass 0 along. Right? What am I passing as E? According to this, we are passing m minus 1 to parameter E. So now we have to look up what is m. M is 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. So that means E, parameter E, will now be 0. Are we doing okay with this? Okay. Let's go ahead and shrink the columns a little bit. What about return? Yep.
Why is M a question mark?
Because it's a local variable. Every time you allocate a column for a local variable as the invocation of a subroutine, the local variable always starts with an unknown value, and we use a question mark to mean an unknown value. What do I do about this, the return info? Return info, starts with a line number, which is line 14. It is returning just the result of that invocation. So in this case, it's really quite easy because whatever this invocation returns, I'm going to return it as my own result. Are we doing okay so far with this? This is simpler than factorial. It's simpler than Fibonacci because there's no calculation whatsoever. Whatever this invocation returns, I'm going to return it to my own invoking subroutine, my own invoker. Are we doing okay with this? Okay. Now that we have set up column M to column R as my new context, I can start from the beginning of the subroutine again. The first action line of the subroutine is line 7. So once again, we are asking B is greater than E, and once again, it is false because B and E are both 0 at this point. And because it is false, I move on to line 10. Line 10 is line 10 is calculating M, which is also easy because B and E are the same, so that means M is going to be 0. Okay, I don't even have to go through the trouble of doing all the calculations. Then we move on to line 11. We ask the question, A bracket M is less than K. Well, let's see if it is true or false. M is 0. A is a reference to column D to column F. Column D to F is an array. We're accessing the one with an index 0. It has a value of 4. So the question is 4 less than 5?
Yes.
Sure. Okay, it is true. So now we say this is true. We move on to line 12. Line 12 is recursive. Okay, we are invoking binary search again. Okay, that's kind of troublesome. But at this point, I am hoping that it is only tedious. It is not, conceptually difficult anymore. It's just tedious to set up everything. So once again, we'll deal with the easy one first. M as a local variable always starts with an unknown value. K is always the same because I use K to pass to K all the time, which is just 5. The parameter A is also easy because I'm just passing the reference along. The reference is a reference to column D to column F. Now we have to look at what we are passing to B and what we are passing to E. According to this, we are using M plus 1 to pass to B. What is M at this point? M is 0. 0 plus 1 is 1. I'm passing E to E. E is already 0. I'm just passing E to E. So E is just, 0. And, okay, let me just make these columns smaller so we can see better. What about the return info? We set it up the same way. We are invoking from